Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vince DeFranchini from Tumblr House, here with the gnarly Charles Coulombe.
Gnarly.
Yeah.
As in, as in surfing.
Yeah, surf's up, dude.
Surf's up, dude?
Yeah, we're Californians. This is how we're supposed to be.
I have never been on a surfboard in my life.
Well, you were transport, so you're not native-born Californian. See?
Well, that's true, but so what? I'm supposed to be some kind of Frankie Avalon figure?
Yeah, yes you are.
Hanging out in Tahiti?
There's a lot of prejudice against us Californians that we're all liberal and surfers and all this and that. So I'm just living the stereotype.
I can never argue with someone who lives the stereotype. All right, well...
Live the cliche.
Did
you say that once upon a time? Live the cliche.
It's true. All right, fine. Cowabunga, brah.
There we go. There we go.
Feel better now?
I feel great.
All right. Catch a tasty wave, man.
Love those tasty waves.
Oh, man, it's just like you're so, I mean, it's like, yeah.
Dude.
For sure.
Totally. Totally, dude.
My hair is actually platinum blonde.
Platinum blonde, I like that.
That's what it is. Let's go surfing now. Everybody's learning how. Come on a safari with me.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I like Beach Boys.
Me too. They're great. Jan and Dean.
Don't know those.
2 waves for every or 2 curls for every board.
I think I've heard that song, yeah.
You bet you have. Yeah. All right, well, Tiki. And speaking of Tiki, my first pre-going away party here at the building was Tiki themed.
Oh, yeah.
And I probably shouldn't tell you this, but something amazing has happened.
What?
Can I call you by your new title?
Okay.
All right, I have to admit, I had one too many zombies. And I went into the elevator, went all the way up to the 47th floor. And then I got out. And you know what I noticed?
What?
No elevator man.
Why is that?
I don't know. It was just open. So I went in.
Okay.
Good news.
What?
That office had a new sign on it.
Did it?
Yep.
What did it say?
It no longer said Stephen Franchini, Executive President, Chairman of the Board, Chief of all he surveys.
No. What did it say?
It said Vincent Franchini, President, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah?
But then I noticed that it wasn't the actual door. That I saw your brother behind it and started playing around with it. Apparently, though, he plans on stepping down and replacing himself with...
Me?
So it seems. That's why you can tell this place is not run by nepotism. Pure meritocracy.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I heard it. Yeah, it's been a long journey from those 2 weeks in the mailroom.
Yeah, to this assignment, to running the show.
Yeah.
So I want to congratulate you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Charles. I won't forget you.
Thank you. I was going to say on your way to the top, but you're going to be there pretty soon. It doesn't take effect yet. But no, apparently your brother has decided he wants to retire to a life of quiet luxury on some Fijian island.
Yeah. Fiji's a nice place.
I guess. But I'd say I'd miss him, but I don't see him that much anyway.
Yeah.
We're hoping that maybe we'll keep the corporate helicopter in readiness to go see him whenever,
Yep.
All right, well, let me see. Any other news of that? No, I guess, I'm lying. It is August. It is the month of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. The 22nd of August, yes, it's my departure date, but it's also the Feast of the Immaculate Heart of Mary in the old calendar. August 25th, St. Louis is coming up, the Feast of St. Louis. On that same day will be the great procession downtown for Our Lady of the Angels in downtown LA.
Ooh.
Let me see what else we got going. It's all so difficult. I can't take it anymore. It's so hard. Today, today would be August the 3rd, the invention of St. Stephen.
The what of St. Stephen?
The invention, the finding of his relics, in other words.
Oh.
They didn't just come up with it.
I thought it was like Thomas Edison invention.
No. Why, look, it's St. Stephen himself.
Yeah.
No, it means the finding of his relics.
Interesting.
So, now you know. So that's what I got for you.
Okay, well, let's, we got some questions on some other developments.
Oh, joy.
Just fresh off Pope Francis changing the catechism on the death penalty. I'm sure everyone wants to know what you think.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the question again? Pope Francis changing the, okay. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, catechisms are not infallible anyway, by their nature. For instance, the Catechism of the Catholic Church flat out contradicts regarding the Catechism of Trent regarding the necessity of baptism. Flat out contradicts them. What is the difference between the two? Well, the difference is that Trent quotes verbatim the Council of Trent, whereas the Catechism of the Catholic Church doesn't quote anybody at all, it just proposes it. And the same is true of a lot of other things in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which has a lot of good points to it, I have to tell you. But one thing that has to be borne in mind about it, as with the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church, is that, as the foreword of that document says, the Catechism of the Catholic Church quotes documents of varying solemnity, that is to say, varying importance. And so, when in looking at the teaching of the Church, you see a document of lesser solemnity, lesser authority, contradicting one of greater, then you go with the one with the greater.
Okay.
So
what? Okay. What's the greater for the death penalty? What's happening here? I mean, did Pope Francis cite good sources?
He didn't cite any except himself. He cited a speech of his own. So basically, he says it's this way because I say so.
Okay.
Now, prior papal teaching on the death penalty has been based on the Church Fathers and things like that. And, of course, in the papal states, people were hung.
Yeah.
And I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that Pius XI ordered the immediate execution of a priest who had raped a child. I don't know if it's true. It may be apocryphal, but that's what I've heard. So, basically what Pope Francis is doing is inviting us to compare him to his predecessors.
Okay.
I wouldn't if I were him.
Hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't want to be compared to my dad. I'd certainly come out on the short end of that stick.
Well, maybe he's counting on most people not referring to anything before 1960s.
Yeah, probably. But that's what we call a con job.
Hmm.
And I hate to think of our Holy Father as a penny-ante grifter.
Okay, well, for those whose memory don't go or who are not interested in anything before 1960s, let's talk about things after 1960s. Let's talk about Pope John Paul's catechism.
Well,
and now, can you reconcile, because he accounted for the death penalty, and he says, under the circumstances where you're preventing loss of life in other areas, is justified. Can you reconcile that with Pope Francis's?
If you twist your head a little bit.
If you twist your head? What does that mean?
Basically, what he's saying that now everything has progressed to the point to where we can square the circle and everything's wonderful.
Square the circle.
Yeah. So everything's beautiful now, and so we don't need the death penalty under any circumstance.
Well, he's just pro-life. That's the real pro-life.
Thank you, Cardinal Seepage.
I mean, it's not just about abortion, okay? It's about immigration. It's about life everywhere. How come you guys ignore everything else and only pro-life? You guys don't care about anything else. I'm sick of it.
That's the seamless garment, which was basically invented by the late Cardinal Bernardine so that Teddy Kennedy could keep receiving communion.
Oh.
It's all guff. I mean, the fact of the matter is to compare the murder of innocent infants with the execution of murderers is horrific, number one. It's just, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, as far as immigration goes, I have not noted that the Vatican are filling the empty spaces there with immigrants from North Africa.
Wow, that's true.
I think the Holy Father, especially since he's not living in the Apostolic Palace, he should start settling him in the Vatican. I mean, Pius XII, to save Jews, filled both the Vatican and the extraterritorial buildings around Italy, around Rome anyway, and Castel Gandolfo with all sorts of refugees, Jews and other people, who were in danger of death. Certainly the Holy Father should be doing the same with immigrants.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like the, it's funny, I hear some quotes from Cardinal Casper. There's a lot of disagreements between the African clergy and the Vatican. The Vatican doesn't seem to like the African clergy too much. Cardinal Arvinze, Cardinal Sarah?
No, well, see, when you're a hypocrite, it's very difficult to keep your story straight. And so they're very in favor of the Third World until the Third World speaks.
Okay.
But then when the Third World speaks and says what the First World would be saying if it wasn't totally screwed up, they get upset.
Oh, okay.
So that's why Cardinal Casper, for instance, when he was being interviewed during the Synod, had all sorts of abusive names to the African bishops, then denied he had said it, then had what he said played back for him. But see, you got to bear in mind that the truth means nothing to these people. Mm-hmm. And that truth in itself does not mean what it means to you or me. Truth is an endlessly malleable thing. It's like a big cosmic marshmallow that can be reworked any moment to fit whatever is in your pointed little head. It's the same thing that guides the Supreme Court at the moment in its deliberations.
Yeah, I love the way you worded it. You provided a blurb for Birth Control, a book by Halliday Southern called Birth Control, a Statement of Christian Doctrine Against the Neo-Malthusians. And you say, quote, truth means nothing to children of the lie.
Yeah. And the children of the lie could be a synonym for our ruling classes in church and state.
Yeah.
They are the children of the lie.
Yeah.
Nothing means anything to them except themselves.
Yeah.
And I wish I could give them what they give us.
Okay.
I mean that in the nicest way possible. Oozing with charity.
Okay, so, that was one of the recent developments in the church. The other one is, not too far off, to be honest. Jovan Westmiller, asks, is Charles going to address the Uncle Ted scandal and the cover-up by the USCCB? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Dear old Uncle Ted, former Cardinal McCarrick. My mother used to have a saying, love is everywhere, but generally not worth picking up. Now, she, of course, was referring to streetwalkers. In this case, I'm referring to Cardinal McCarrick. The details, of course, will be known to everyone listening to me. As will be apparent, both here and in Rome, and around the world in different countries, there are a number of self-sustaining, self-reproducing coteries of gay gentlemen in the higher reaches of the Catholic Church. This is not the first time this has happened. It was the case under Julius III in the 1550s. It was the case during the Pornocracy, the 900s, into the 1000s. And that was, 120 years of that. Mm-hmm. When the popes themselves were chosen by, for a better word, I can only say Roman sluts. As you might imagine, clerical discipline under that kind of a rule went all to pieces. So much so that in the 12th century or 11th century, St. Peter Damian wrote the Book of Gomorrah, outlining clerical sexual sins at that time, and it makes really grisly reading today. There's a new version of it just out. Because human nature doesn't change, human sinfulness doesn't change, and when, for whatever reason, the top echelon of the church are busy with other things, things go haywire. there'll always be any kind of sinner you can imagine in the church and in the hierarchy of the church. Always. But how powerful they are, how much the fore they come to, that varies. Now, inevitably, two things, when this stuff happens, two things usually end up reversing it or stamping it down for a while.
What?
A reformist pope who's very keen on rooting out the evil as opposed to being part of it. When a pope's part of the evil, it makes things harder. But the second is an upswing of sanctity on the part of the church people. In other words, let's say, just for the sake of argument, that a cardinal of the Holy Roman Church was basically constructed a gay harem for himself. Or that it was the Pope, a la Julius III.
Okay.
Now, on the one hand, these things do have to be exposed and denounced. There's no way around that. I mean, what happens if you allow mold to grow in the dark?
It grows more.
Yeah. Do roaches enjoy the light?
Do roaches enjoy the light? No, I guess when you turn the light on, they scatter.
Right.
You have a lot of them.
So basically, if you don't want mold, you don't want roaches, you need to keep the light on.
That's interesting. That's a good argument when, I think a lot of people are wondering, how much can we attack this and how do we do it with charity?
Well, I'll get to that.
Yeah.
Because that's only half the battle.
Okay.
The other half is personal sanctity. All of us have to strive to become saints. Not enough of us do. If we did, then on one level we'd doubtless get the clergy we deserve. But on another level, the holier we are, the more prudent we become, and the easier able to balance severity with mercy.
Interesting. Severity with mercy. Okay.
Because, I mean, some of these people, I don't know about McCarrick, but some of his boys were probably not as terrible as he was. Maybe a few of them even were salvageable.
Okay.
But it takes the discernment of the Holy Ghost to figure that out. And you don't get that unless you try to be holy yourself. But even putting that aside, just as every sin any one of us commits helps bring the whole structure down, every virtue we practice lifts it up. So if you're really concerned and horrified about Uncle Ted McCarrick and the rest of the gang, apart from denouncing their evils, work on your own personal sanctity, your devotional life, your sacramental life. If we were all holier people, this would be much less of a problem. But in a very real sense, these dogs in office reflect us.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of us laity have no trouble coexisting with fornication? And when I say coexisting, I don't mean necessarily doing it oneself, but turning a blind eye to contraception. We attack homosexuality for its unnatural nature, and it is unnatural. But so too is contraceptive heterosexuality. And we don't have a problem with that. But it is inevitably led to abortion.
Yeah.
And we don't have a problem with that either. So we may indeed be ruled by scumbags. The trick is to avoid resembling them.
Okay.
We don't want to look by the people. We don't want to look or be like the people who misrule us. And if enough of us attempt to become holy, the whole thing will get better.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads into, that kind of almost answers the next question from Anthony Giovacchini. He asks, how will the sex abuse crisis in the church finally be resolved? I just don't understand how so many wicked perverts have infiltrated Christ's holy church. Countless lives have been ruined, and the faith of many has been shattered. Do you think Pope Francis has the will to fix this?
Well, you're right. I've already answered a large part of that. We need to be holy ourselves, and we need to expose this stuff prudently.
Yeah.
And in accordance with the, but it does have to be exposed. There's no doubt about that. As far as Pope Francis, he's the big question mark. Is he a weak-willed non-solver, or is he part of the problem? Is he Julius III, or is he Leo X?
Well, let me ask you this. How long has he been in office?
He has been in office since 2013.
So that's like, so what is that? That's 5 years? So
5 years.
That's longer than a presidential term. So, I mean, that's like, you know, is there accounting? Like, can we look at a record like, okay, what has he done? How has he stacked up?
Pretty poorly.
Pretty poorly.
He's done some very good things. I mean, he canonized Zeno Sarah.
But specifically, I mean, what is his approach to this solving the sex abuse crisis?
He doesn't have one. I mean, under Pope Benedict, 800 priests were sacked, and there was a zero tolerance policy. Under this guy, if you're a buddy of his or a buddy of one of his buddies, doesn't matter what you do, unless A, you're arrested civilly, and B, you're the subject of the media. If you don't have that against you, then he'll keep you.
Well, isn't
Love will bloom.
Doesn't that continue with this theme of mercy, though?
Yes, but his mercy is only extended to the guilty. Toward the innocent, he has very little mercy at all.
What does that mean?
It means he's not a nice person.
To the innocent?
He's not a nice person to the innocent.
Okay, you're gonna have to elaborate on that one.
No, I don't.
No, you don't?
No.
That's defamation of character. You need to justify.
I don't need to justify nothing.
No?
No. I actually, the way that he has dealt with any conservative to traditional church order that he could control shows what he's like. I mean, you take the Franciscans, the Immaculate, who were growing rapidly and were doing quite well. He wrecked them. Look at the Order of Malta. He just, and of course, he loves and ended the inquiry into all of those orders of wild liberal American sisters, you know, the pantsuited gray-haired monsters. He endorsed them and even promised to look into the possibility of deaconesses for them. That is his bunch. The old women of all genders, the gay priests, the McCarricks of the world, the embezzlers and so forth. He's got a real coterie there. Every time you turn around, some other close ally of the Pope is being exposed to either financial or sexual malfeasance or both. And yet he goes blithely on, talking away, and smacking around people like, you know, oh, these young Catholics, they're terrible, they're rigid, ooh, just so terrible. I mean, the nicest thing I could say about him is that his view of reality is 180 degrees from reality.
Yeah.
And yes, he's the real Pope.
Okay. I did end up finishing reading Dictator Pope, and one of the things that that does get a lot of press is sort of the corruption with the finances at the Vatican. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out, as Henry Sire writes it. But yeah, there's more than just the sexual abuse stuff going on over there. There's a lot of financial corruption, it seems.
Well, there is, and he really either doesn't know and doesn't care, or he's part of the problem. But as I say, we've had popes like him before. And if we have world enough in time, we'll have more like that. But with any luck, we'll also get a run of saints sooner rather than later, please God.
You know, I still have to believe, I mean, again, citing Dictator Pope, all the circumstances that had to happen, the extraordinary circumstances that had to happen to get Pope Francis to become Pope are so unbelievable that I absolutely believe it was 100% God's will that he is Pope.
Quite likely, because one of the things he's been doing is he's forcing us to examine what's real.
See, yeah, that's good. This is good. Like we don't just blindly listen anymore. We listen to the Pope, and then we think.
Yeah.
And that's a huge jump from what we used to do.
And it's a good jump because under the old regime, we accepted anything.
Exactly.
Whereas now, you really have to know what you're talking about, or else shut up.
Exactly.
And the Holy Father, I mean...
So he's a teacher in a sense. This is a learning experience for us.
Oh yeah, it's a teaching moment, as Charlie Curran used to say. One of the Holy Father's goddesses. As I say, love is everywhere, but generally not worth picking up.
Mm-hmm.
What else you got?
All right, next 3 questions is from Davis Blank.
Davis Blank.
Yeah.
B-L-A-N-C or B-L-A-N-K?
K.
All right.
You got a problem with his name?
No. I just think it's a clean slate. Go ahead.
Okay. In an episode not long ago, you all had a discussion about the supernatural elements of the Mass and the importance of having a sense of childlike wonder towards the faith, rather than just a strict, these are the rules mentality.
Right.
I'm a revert and a deeply damaged man from a childhood of public education and a previous heathen lifestyle. The wonder is not in me at all. Can I get it back? My children naturally have such wonder, but what can I do to help keep them from losing it?
Very good question, Mr. Blank. The first thing is you can see what is it that causes wonder in you in general. You know? Scenery, stars, mountains, particularly affecting books or poetry or music. What is it that evokes wonder in you, full stop, anyway? There's something must, and whatever it is, you've got to begin to connect it to God himself, because he's the creation of, or the creator rather, of all that is wonderful. It could be food, you know, maybe you're sort of a Julia Child sort of goes into paroxysms over a cream sauce made just the right way. Well, those are all reflections of God, so you can look into that. You can explore history and literature and so forth if you haven't already. Look at what makes your children enchanted, what gets them excited, and try to see it through their eyes.
There is a problem. I understand perfectly what Mr. Blank is talking about. There's one hurdle when it comes to the Mass, because we people are funny. We naturally take for granted what is in abundance because it is in abundance,
Right.
and we value scarcity because it's scarce. So I think the fact that because the Mass is, we have it weekly and for some even daily, that makes it less special. The routine of it.
Yeah.
One of the shows I watched, it was a miniseries, AMC The Terror. It was a horror thing. It was a kind of a fictionalization of 1840 British expedition to Northwest Passage, and it disappeared. And so everybody died. So at the end of the thing, it's horror, by the way, and it's really gruesome, so I'm not recommending it. But one of the lieutenants, everyone knew they were dead. They were going to die. And in one of the most beautiful speeches I've ever seen on television or movies, this lieutenant talks about the one time he went to Catholic Mass and received the Eucharist. And it was it was filled with such wonderment. And he said, he was recalling it to someone else, and he said it was a perfect, pure moment in an entire lifetime of imperfectness.
Mm.
And it was such a beautiful thing. Now that it was easy for him because he had this one moment in his life. And so imagine all you, if there was only one time that you went to Mass and you received the Eucharist, then you would hype it up. Then it's like, wow, this one time.
Yeah.
But because it's weekly, that changes our minds.
It changes the dynamic somewhat, but you can fix that a bit I don't want to plug my book, The Catholic Quest for the Holy Grail, but read about the Grail and remember that that's the Blessed Sacrament. Go to Byzantine or Maronite or Coptic or Anglican use masses. You know, not necessarily as a regular diet, but go to them to get a fresh sense of how other cultures view the Blessed Sacrament. But you know, really, what is at the bottom, as I sit here thinking and talking at you, what's at the bottom of wonder and awe is gratitude. I think that if you cultivate the attitude of being grateful to God for all that you have, wonder will find its way to you. I mean, you know, you've already seen a bit of it with your children. I find it very hard to believe that you did not find it wondrous on some level that you and your wife produced these independent beings who, as they get older, will become all the more independent. You created housing for wills completely separate from your own. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and don't forget to pray for it. That goes without saying.
Yeah, but we'll say it anyway. Pray for that sense of wonder. It's like some people pray for the gift of tears. Pray for that sense of wonder.
Catholic Quest for Holy Grail, that filled me with fervor, because with all these relics, you know, it's kind of funny, but there's a sense that, hey, this stuff is real.
Yeah, it's all true.
I would recommend Davis Blank to get the book, but he buys all of our books. He's a huge book buyer, and so I'm asking a bunch of questions from a book buyer. Coincidence? All you people have questions. Could learn something from Mr. Blank here.
All right, what else we got?
His next question. I was listening to a talk on relics and about how the Protestants destroyed many of them. Then in thinking of the history of the revolt and the chaos of it, murders, sackings, vandalization, widespread disorder, the thought struck me. Before there was ISIS, there were the Protestants. Mr. Coulombe, am I far off base here?
No, not in the beginning. It's exactly what it was like. It was terrorism, it was iconoclasm. In northern Germany, in Scandinavia, the Netherlands, the British Isles, Switzerland. It was horrible. There's no other word to describe it. Now, eventually, it settled down as the dominant classes took control of their new state pet churches. And then smaller groups like the Anabaptists or the Free Churches or whomever were kind of shunted aside. But, no, you're not off base, not at all.
All right, Mr. Blank's final question.
Yes.
Could Mr. Coulombe recommend any literature, TV, or movies that well model traditional femininity?
Oh, God bless us all. Downton Abbey.
Okay. That's been on my to-watch list, yeah.
All right, so watch Downton Abbey. Although you'll find that the oldest daughter and the middle daughter get a little slutty.
No. Loaded into this question, by definition, in order to find traditional femininity, would it have to be a period piece?
Well, see, and that's part of the problem because, you know, period pieces of necessity dwell with eras that were en route to being what we are now.
Yeah.
Which is a problem. I mean, I could say...
We can't look to Barbara Stanwyck, Katharine Hepburn, Audrey Hepburn.
They were all wonderful. But I mean, like Breakfast at Tiffany's, where, oh my gosh, Audrey Hepburn will melt your heart, but she's a good time girl.
That's true.
Yeah. Of course, George Papard comes across as very masculine. He's a kept man. So.
What about My Fair Lady? My favorite musical. Come on.
I love the show. All right, I love the show. But I mean, you know, why not Mad Men?
Whoa! I like Mad Men, but
well, see, that's the femininity I remember.
So you're saying that was a more accurate depiction of what femininity was like?
Well, it's more at
that time.
It's closer to what I saw.
Yeah, what you saw.
Than Downton Abbey was, because you know I wasn't around in World War I.
Okay.
And I mean, obviously, there were some loose chicks in Mad Men.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, you had the feeling that they were attempting to live up to an ideal they didn't. Same with the guys. I mean, all the guys stood up with Anna Rome and all that, but at the same time, they're preying on the women.
Yeah.
So, let's just say the externals were what I remember. Because you bear in mind, as a little kid, I didn't really see the other side of it.
Okay.
But a little kid who never sees the other side of things at any time.
What about adaptations of some novels? What about Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Howard's End, all that good stuff?
Jane Austen is good. I think that's probably why so many conservative-minded girls fall in love with Jane Austen. I think that's probably why.
Yeah.
I mean, again, when I was young, which was a long time ago, I don't think I knew any girl interested in literature and of a sane disposition who didn't love Jane Austen.
It's true.
I'm sure if one thought about it, there'd be others. Femininity isn't something I give a lot of thought to, not being very feminine myself. Mm-hmm. Although I have been accused of being a giggling cuck.
You know who has given a lot of thought to femininity?
My old friend
Solange Hertz.
That's she.
Searcher of Majesty, and Women, Words, and Wisdom. The whole point of these are to discover authentic femininity. Let's see, what do I say about this? One of the big things she's on... one of the big things she talks about is masculine and feminine spirituality. Those are important differences. Yes. Very important differences. Extremely. Men pray differently from women. And so the two shouldn't pray like each other because they're both of different mindsets.
And they pray differently upon each other.
I don't like that pun.
Oh, all right, never mind.
Let's see here. And what's the other one? Oh, the other big point is that she attacks is the modern concept of a woman getting out of the house. You need to get out to live life. And one of her big things is if you're a housewife, the family should be your life. You should love the family. You shouldn't be like, oh gosh, these kids, they're driving me up the wall. Let me go to some women's club and really let my hair down.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Well, and it also, one thing I will say in terms of the relationship with married people, and mind you, being a bachelor, you might think, well, gee, what have you got to say about married people? The answer is most of my friends are married. That's just what happens if you last long enough. And if there's anything I've noticed, it's that really the wife determines the atmosphere of the house much more than the husband does. Especially if she's not working. She is in a position to turn the home into a little bit of paradise. Men are pretty simple creatures, ladies. It doesn't take a lot to make us happy. It really doesn't. When your man comes home, if you're trying to look your best and the place is well picked up, you greet him as though you're excited to see him, and you put off complaints for maybe 20 minutes until he unwinds, you'll have a very, very happy man. It doesn't take much. You can say, well, why shouldn't I be able to share my problems with him immediately? Well, because ideally, when he comes home from work, his home is a refuge, not another battleground. Mm. The problem is, if what he comes home to is a constant source of annoyance and battle, then his work becomes his refuge. If that's all that happens, that's bad. But the problem is that, as the immortal Jack Jones tells us in Wives and Lovers, day after day there are girls at the office, and men will always be men. If I had a dime for, well, not a dime, but certainly $20 for every case of adultery I knew that came out of that dynamic, I'd be able to treat you to Musso and Frank's tonight.
That's a ritzy place?
Yeah.
$20 each time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So out of the thing where the man comes home and all these problems get dumped on him?
In the immediate.
In the immediate, yeah.
Whereas if he comes home, his wife looks happy to see him, sits him down, gets him a drink or something, says, "How was your day?" lets him vent. Then as soon as he's vented, then he wants to know what her thing is. And then she can tell him. And one thing that men love, unless they're morons, they love to fix problems. So, if after he said, "Oh, my boss yelled at me again," and the idiot in the next cubicle once again sucking on his false teeth till I could brain him with my computer, and on and on and on and on. When he's finished, "So what about you, doll? What was going on?" She says, "Well, pretty good. Of course, afraid your son broke the neighbor's window."
So the women were just not interested. It sounds like they weren't even interested in listening to their husbands.
No, I'm saying well, they often aren't today, especially if they're out working.
But that's not a charge that can be laid specifically on women. I mean, men do that too all the time.
Well, they do, but the difference is that, as I say, once they're vetted, we can turn around and get them to do something, fix things, make things happen, make things work.
I don't know how people could get married in that context where it's so one-sided.
Oh, they did, because the alternative, you got to bear in mind that, how do I put this? It really wasn't one-sided, because what the woman got out of it was, apart from her husband's support, was just that, support. A life, a place, a house, children. Women have been taught to think that the men's world is a great place. It's not.
Yeah.
The housewife did not have to go through the garbage that the man had to go through. And there's a lot of garbage.
Yeah.
If you've got a decent husband who's respectful and looks after you and so forth, that's a world of difference from crawling to an office that may be a competitive or dead end. I'm in the mailroom and I've been there for 50 years. And I'm looking to retire with my gold watch and my gilded headband.
Oh man, that's a sad story.
It's a sad story, but why does he do it? He does it to keep his wife and kids, that's why he does it.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, having said that, so depending on the profession, traditionally, some women were even wilder for their husband's success than the husbands. People always used to joke about faculty wives at universities, because these ladies were definitely on the lookout for their husband's advantages, and would take advantage of things that the man wouldn't. There's an old saying, behind every great man there's a good woman.
Yeah.
Well, it's not false.
Okay.
Partly because a good woman inspires a man to want to do better. Partly because beyond that, you want to be able to provide more for her and for the kids. And again, if she provides an environment for you that's happy, there's very little you won't do for her. And yes, it centers around the husband working and doing things.
And the often overlooked part of marriage is you're supposed to do it to help you guys get to heaven too.
That part gets left out a lot. As does
we forget about that.
As does the raising of the children.
Yeah.
We forget about that too.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the two of them. It's also about the little the little darlings.
Yeah.
And helping the little darlings to get to heaven. Now, I can tell you, it's funny, I was probably the last generation of urban Americans, for whom it was peculiar for the mother to have an outside job. Mine never did while I was alive. When I was little, she did acting and all that. We were back home. Once we came out here, that was it. She was a housewife. And, she was there when I came home in the morning. Mm-hmm. When I came home in the evening, rather, from school in the afternoon. Sometimes, much to my annoyance, she would drag me to the tea room in Bullock's, Wiltshire. Then she'd be there with a bunch of other ladies with their hats and gloves on, ordering tea, and I would sit there bored out of my skull. But no, I'm glad she did it, because what she didn't know, and the other ladies who went to tea didn't know, and I didn't know, was that that whole world was shortly going to die.
Mm.
So I'm glad I got to see it.
Yeah.
Even though I can remember just sitting there with little legs on the chair, just bored out of my skull. But to be fair, as soon as we finished with our tea, she'd let me loose in the toy department.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question is from Blake Symington.
Hello, Blake.
I would like to ask about traditional Catholic teaching with regards to the Orthodox Church. Specifically, what the Church teaches about the validity of their sacraments and about their salvation. Furthermore, I should like to ask Charles what he thinks about the possibility of a reconciliation of the Orthodox and Catholic churches.
Well, good questions. Firstly, the Catholic Church recognizes Orthodox sacraments as valid. That's why, according to Canon 844, if you cannot get to a Catholic priest, you're allowed to receive from Orthodox. You can go to confession, receive communion from them, if they'll do it for you. And there is a big if there. But their sacraments are valid. When they absolve sins, those sins are gone. When they call God down upon the altar, there he is. That's without a doubt. Same is also true of what are called the lesser Eastern churches, the Assyrians, the Ethiopians, the Copts, the Malabaris, the Syrian Jacobites, and the Armenians.
Mm.
All their rites are valid.
Where does it say it? What's the authority that says that?
Oh gosh, from the very beginning when Pope, St. Cyprian was the Bishop of Carthage, Pope Cornelius, the first declared that the sacraments are ex opere operato, which means that as long as the proper form and matter and intention are used, then schismatic or heretical sacraments are valid.
That's what he said, schismatic or heretical?
Yeah.
Wow.
So long as those three things are done and the apostolic succession is maintained. And what is the apostolic succession? That is the succession from the apostles of the episcopate.
Uh-huh.
It was not preserved with the Anglicans or the other Protestant churches, but it was preserved by the Orthodox and these other groups.
Okay.
Now, in terms of their salvation, they have the means of salvation, the sacraments, but whether it avails them, that depends upon the individual. What do I mean by that? Well, we know from the Council of Florence that schismatics are banned from heaven. But schism is a very individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are some Orthodox who hate the Pope, hate the Catholic Church. They're definitely schismatics. And if they die that way, in that utter hatred of Catholicism, I don't see how they would save their souls. But there are other Orthodox who are quite different. I've known some who've accepted the Pope as head of the Church, pray for the dead, or pray for souls in purgatory, even though Orthodox aren't supposed to believe in it. People like that, it's a different story. Because you've got to bear in mind that the Orthodox churches are like parts of the Catholic Church that were broken off and went off on their own.
Yeah.
But, unlike heresy, which is a very definite act of the will, schism is very often a question of circumstance. So, for instance, let's say that you were a Catholic in England in the 1500s. Your episcopate are all Anglican. But they've all got valid orders. This is under Henry VIII. So your church is schismatic. Are you schismatic? Well, that depends on you. Similarly, I have known Catholics, including Catholic prelates, who were in their heart of hearts schismatic. That is to say, they did not accept the authority of the Pope,
Yeah.
only their own. And they were schismatics, if the word means anything.
Yeah.
If I were to take such an Orthodox person who accepts the Pope and so forth, and such a Catholic, quote-unquote, prelate, which one's really the Catholic? So, in my humble opinion, and of course if the Church wants to correct me, I'm certainly welcome to it, but whether or not an Orthodox is schismatic depends entirely upon his own mental state.
I see.
And I would suspect that many a person who appears to be a schismatic in the Orthodox Church is not. For that matter, we're allowed to venerate a certain number of post-schism Orthodox saints as saints.
Yeah.
Now that implies that they're in heaven, or we couldn't venerate them.
Interesting.
So, but you see how weird and gooey it gets.
Yeah.
It's not, and of course the other thing is, in a sense, it was simpler before 1964,
Yeah.
because at that point, the Archbishop of, the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Pope of Rome had excommunicated each other, at least their predecessors had. And there it was.
Yeah.
But those were lifted in 1964. So what does that mean? I don't know. I think at the very least, I would say that an Orthodox who does not hate the Church, in other words, who's not schismatically minded, has as good a chance of saving his soul via the sacraments at his disposal as a Catholic does. That is to say, it's still tough. Now the question is, the question is about the possibility of a reconciliation.
Yeah.
I have to believe, again, looking at history and seeing that God has allowed the apostolic succession to die out in some places and to stay in others, I have to presume that there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And, I agree very much with the current Patriarch of Moscow, who says that as a schism is like a divorce, and we need to see it as a sin, as a wrong,
Yeah.
before we can do anything about it, before we can get past it. And we have to try to love the other side. Now, what does this mean concretely? Well, it means, firstly, we have got to get over being used to the East being in schism. We have got to see that as wrong. Not wrong as in they're evil. Wrong as in it's a bad state of affairs. And the thing about schism, as St. Thomas points out, while objectively speaking, heresy is worse, subjectively speaking, schism is worse. And the reason is that heresy, the heretic like the Orthodox, both believe that they're pushing for God's will, God's word, God's belief. But the schism, either or both sides in a schism are just out for themselves.
Yeah.
Anyway, do I believe that East and West will one day be reunited? Yes. Do I think it's going to be easy? No. Do I think it will probably be as the result of some horror that smacked both sides around pretty good? Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I think is going to happen. Some terrible, whether it be human or natural, something awful is going to force us all to give up our pride and to see in each other brothers in the sacraments. But of course, it shouldn't happen in our time because nothing bad can ever happen to us who are alive at the moment.
No, we're very blessed.
What else you got?
Okay, next question is from Justin Weaver. What does Charles believe in regards to the various conspiracy theories espoused by many traditionalist Catholics? In particular, what does he think of those involving The Third Secret of Fatima, and the death of Pope John Paul I.
No, I could tell you, but I have to kill myself.
Don't.
No. No, I won't do that. Firstly, as I've said before regarding the Freemasons and Illuminati and all that, there's a certain amount of conspiracy in history, there's a certain amount of catastrophe. Unless you're part of a given conspiracy, you wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I'm going to say about the Third Secret of Fatima and the death of John Paul I are contingent upon the fact that I had no personal connection with either event.
Okay.
And so I don't really know. And I couldn't really know. It does seem like a chunk of the Third Secret was left out. But I don't know.
Yeah. Now, what happened? So, Saint Pope John the 23rd.
Yeah.
He saw the Third Secret, said it's not for our time.
And put it away.
Put it away. Benedict comes out with it, and it seems like a big nothing.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's a big nothing lends itself to conspiracy, because everyone is wondering, okay, why couldn't Pope John XXIII reveal that? Because that's so innocuous.
Well, that's the thing. I mean...
But far be it from me. But at the same time, far be it from me to call Pope Benedict a liar. See, that's what makes it.
That's what makes the whole thing so difficult. And as I say, I really don't know.
Yeah, it's just strange.
It's very strange. It's very peculiar. And the problem, and this is a message to any of you out there who may one day be in any kind of authority in church or state. When things are strange, they lend themselves to conspiracy theories, even if they're absolutely innocent. You know, if every day you go to the same Romanian restaurant for 30 years, and you're not Romanian, people are going to wonder. And if you act shady when they ask you about it, why do you go to the Romanian restaurant? Well, the real reason is that there's something your wife actually likes, but you tell her you get it from somewhere else, you have it homemade. I mean, it's a relatively innocent explanation, but it sounds freaky.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask that question. Not important. I mean, you could make things seem a lot more mysterious than they are necessarily. Or then maybe they are. Maybe you go to the Romanian restaurant because it's your KGB drop. I don't know. Now, with the question of John Paul I, honestly, I have a stronger opinion there.
It seems like there's less there. To me, from my perspective, it seems like, okay, the big thing he said was, we're going to have a church of the poor. And so then, I think as Godfather Part 3 runs with, he got killed for financial corruption reasons, because all the big money people didn't like that. And that's all, yeah.
You know, when I remember my dad said, when he said that, want a church of the poor, my dad's response was, great, stop taking Peter's pence.
Yeah.
You can have what you want, holy fella.
Yeah.
But, no, honestly, I think the cover story is the true one. I mean, look, if somebody were able to get a pope today, Francis had been dead 4 years ago. I mean, you gotta bear in mind, that man has made enormous enemies over the time that he's been in. If there were a way to get to him, he'd have been gotten to.
I was scared when he did that trip to Egypt. I didn't think he was going to make it out of there. I thought that was unbelievable.
A lot of people were. But see, nothing happened.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think it's likelier that JP1 died of natural causes.
Well, were there other conspiracies attached to it other than the financial? Was there something else floating around?
Well, I mean, yeah, there were. I mean, traditionalists thought that he was murdered because he was going to bring back the traditional mass.
I didn't hear that.
Liberals thought he was going to get it. He got it because he was going to lift Humanae Vitae. I mean, everybody read into it what their own agenda was.
Yeah.
You know, he was murdered because he was going to canonize Father Sarah. Yeah, there was an old saying: the deathbeds of the great are the seedbeds of legend. And never was this truer than with John Paul I.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for the questions today.
What else we got?
Time for the books.
Oh boy.
Today we have two different books, the same author. You guys may have heard of him. His name is Hilaire Belloc.
Hilary Belloc.
Hilaire Belloc. Yeah, so The Great Heresies and Characters of the Reformation. Have you heard of these books?
I've read them. I read them when I was in high school.
Are they good books?
They're great books. Moreover, for O thou who hast asked, if they were like ice, read them and weep.
No, I kid. These are two huge books. Very famous books. I will read the back cover because you might be wondering, what are the Great Heresies? What are the Great Heresies? And they're stated Arianism, Mohammedanism,
Islam.
Albigensianism. I actually don't know that one.
I do.
What is that?
It's the fun one.
Okay, I guess we're gonna have to read to find out, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the two obvious ones: Protestantism, modernism. Boring. No,
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that. Yeah, so important. But I've been wanting to read this book too. This is pretty high up there on my to read list. Characters of the Reformation. Who are some of these characters we got here?
Lots.
Lots. Why should we read this book?
Well, you should.
No, but what?
Oh, because you'll get to know characters you don't really know. I mean, King Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Thomas Cromwell. They're all, by the way, they're pan-continental. Because you've got Queen Elizabeth, Mary Tudor, Mary Stuart, King Henry IV of France, James I of England, Ferdinand II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor during the 30 Years' War.
Mm-hmm.
Gustavus Adolphus was King of Sweden, Richelieu, Laud, Oliver Cromwell, William of Orange, Louis XIV. I mean, it's great in that they show you the Reformation as a transnational phenomenon, not just English-speaking countries.
What was I going to ask? Who's your favorite Catholic historian? Is it Belloc?
That's hard.
Who are you thinking? Who are the contenders on this one?
Well, I mean, if you're going to say of all time,
Yeah.
probably Belloc, although he's very deficient when it comes to French history.
Oh, what a cardinal sin.
It is. It is. But the reason for that is that he was a relative of Danton. He was one of the French revolutionaries. And so he had to somehow defend the French Revolution on Catholic grounds.
Oh yeah, we got a lot of questions. What's with the affinity from both Chesterton and Belloc about those things?
Well, Chesterton's affinity was because of Belloc. Belloc was basically his interpreter of all things French.
Okay.
And then Belloc himself, as I say, his problem was that he was a relation of Danton.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you'll find about the French is that they're very family-minded. Probably, if there had been revolutionaries in my family, I might very well come up with all sorts of weird reasons why they weren't as bad as they were. Fortunately, I was spared that horrible, horrible, horrible cross. But he wasn't. So, when it comes to French matters, I would recommend another historian, this is in English, Bernard Fay, F-A-Y.
Oh, we might sell his books. If not, I know that name.
Yeah. Is best as a corrective to Belloc's work on French history.
Okay.
Is Louis XVI or the End of a World. Now, another individual that I would point out, she was a novelist, but she wrote historical novels. And that was a lady called Jane Lane. And the period she covers in British and English and Scots history is basically from the time of Mary Queen of Scots to 1802 or thereabouts. And also Robert Hugh Benson, Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson.
Oh, definitely know that name.
Yeah, he wrote some very, very good historical novels.
Did he write Christ the King, Lord of History?
No, that was William Carroll.
Okay. So other than the French aberration, Belloc is absolutely...
Yeah.
Okay, I have one question for Great Heresies. I've heard this a long time ago, and I thought it came from this book. and it was a proposition set forth by Belloc. He proposed, first off, he saw the rise of Islam already.
Right.
And he saw it growing. He predicted it was going to grow more. And what I heard is that he predicted that the threat of Islam would galvanize Christianity into revitalizing itself again. Christendom would be revitalized because of the Muslim threat.
Yeah.
Did he say that, and do you agree with that?
Yes and yes.
Wow, okay. I didn't know you agreed with it on that one.
I believe, I think we're already seeing the first signs of it in Central Europe, and even in Western Europe, because these people like Orban in Hungary, and some of these other folk in the rest of Europe, who send our liberals into little paroxysms, oh, I could just twerk this waffle. Well, those are precisely the people, the type of leader, who will arise in Europe's last extremity.
Now, see, I would agree with that on the basis that it's a logical reaction.
No.
But, see, the problem why I have reservations about it is that liberals are not logical. They're not, as you say, children of the... reality has nothing on children of the lie. So how can we... are the liberals going to flip on this and say, yeah, we need to stop this?
They won't flip, but because they won't be able to rule, they won't be able to deliver the bacon. Let me explain something about life. When a rulership are no longer capable of dealing with reality because they're living off in Zululand, off in the stars somewhere, and reality gets too tough for them to deal with, they generally lose their control, and somebody replaces them.
Okay, well, I was talking about liberals in general. I mean, like not just the leadership.
Well, the leadership won't matter. I mean, the vast majority of people have no opinion about anything, really.
Well, when you say the leadership is what matters, I mean, you say every government gets the leadership. Every nation gets the government it deserves.
That's true.
So
it's a great mystery. There's
the
a
chicken and the egg.
You're absolutely right. But having said that, the people are funny when it's a choice between adherence to moronic leadership and dying. The masses are generally wiser than their masters.
Okay, so you're saying the liberals are going to lose their constituency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, look at Weimar Germany or Imperial Japan. People will turn on, if they think their lives and their livelihoods are at stake, they will turn on a dime.
Does that apply? I know you've always applied that to Europe. Does that also apply to America?
That, my dear, dear Vincenzo, is the great $6 question. I don't know.
Yeah, because...
we are different. We do not turn quickly. Although, that may not be entirely true. I mean, when I was born, there was still a lot of people willing to defend segregation. Now, it's the second worst sin.
It's interesting.
But
that's fused with our national religion.
I know it is. But into it too, though, think of just the way the homo stuff has gone in your day. I mean, when you think back to when you were a teenager, the idea of gay marriage was ridiculous. And now if you don't accept it, you're a homophobe and a higger and a beta.
That's interesting. So, well, again, the commonalities is that it got fused into national religion, so all else equal, this handling of a Muslim threat would have to somehow get fused into national religion.
Yeah, and something would have to happen to us at least as bad as the Twin Towers. I mean, basically our little rear ends would have to be smacked hard.
I hope not as hard as Star Spangled Crown proposes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would not want to see that. And honestly,
I mean, Star Spangled Crown. I mean, to give you guys levels of what I'm talking about in Star Spangled Crown, one of my favorite understatement lines. There were mass starvations and all around. It was a rough winter. As in, like, yeah, winters are more rough, mass starvations. That's a cyclical thing now.
Makes it worse, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a rough winter. Well, and the funny thing is, actually, this isn't apropos of anything, but I remember when I was writing it and putting myself into the mindset of my fictional great-nephew. In a lot of ways, if you think about it, he was like so many old Europeans we've spoken to or seen, who lived through the Depression and the wreckage of World War II.
And it became normal to them. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
And I lived through it, and here we are now. I remember there was a movie with Fred MacMurray set in Singapore just after World War II, like maybe a year or two after.
Mm-hmm.
So if Fred MacMurray goes into a bar he used to go into before the war, and this is the first time he's been in it since everything was at peace. So he says to the bartender, "Well, Jimmy, how was your war?" And the bartender says, "Oh, whatever that was. Starvation, the internment camp, starvation, malaria, the usual." And the thing is, that was the way people talked about it then. Because they sewed it up inside.
Wow.
And they tried to go on as though nothing had happened. And some were more successful at it than others. Because that, when you have seen the unthinkable and the horrible, just, well, if it doesn't destroy you,
Yeah.
you just suck it up, and you do.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, on the one hand, I pray to God that our beloved country never goes through anything like that. But on the other hand, I'm all too aware that people being people, and history being history, we probably are never going to get our brains sewed on tight again, if we ever do. Because that's the alternative. The alternative is that everything goes to hell and we don't catch on.
Mm.
And so we cease to exist as the country you see. We become something else.
Well.
And being raised on American heritage and Norman Rockwell and Irving Berlin, I would like to see the United States survive its dark night of the soul.
Yeah. I have a more hopeful approach. I'm still pretty young, so I can be naively hopeful. One of the most inspiring things that I've ever heard was when you and I we went to Michael Vorse came to our parish.
Yeah.
And a gentleman on the other side of the orange curtain, name of Mark McGrath, I think. Mm-hmm. He is an upstanding citizen, a Catholic citizen, and he opened for Michael Vorse, and he said, all of China before it was communist, it only took 300 people to make all of China communist.
Yeah.
All of it, 300 people.
Okay.
And the reason he was telling us is that it's possible. Mass evangelization. All it takes is 300.
History is made by determined minorities.
There you go.
Mind you, those were 300 people willing to spend their lives in the cause.
Yeah. No, of course. Of course.
Well, you say of course, but I mean, that's important to bear in mind. Most of us are not willing to do anything that will eject us from our comfort zone.
Right. That's one of the biggest things that I preach. I mean, it's...
Well, it's why we're such little bunnies.
Yeah.
I mean, stop and think about it for a second. Do you think, I don't want to point the finger at anyone in particular, but the moronic piece of garbage federal judge that knocked down Proposition 8, he's a member of some of the biggest clubs in this state. Do you think that if any of his colleagues have been willing to say publicly, you know what, you're a moron, you destroyed the law, and being gay yourself, you should have recused yourself? Which he was, by the way.
Wow.
That's not my hyperbole.
Okay.
But there was no one to be found to say that. Because what do they think of me? What if I can't get into the club? Oh, it'd be so awfuls. Well, okay, then you know what? If you're in that position, you don't like what he did, but you weren't willing to raise a hand against it?
Eat it.
Just so.
Well.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is really where we all are. Because you know what? All of us do that to some degree. Somewhere, someplace, ladies and gentlemen, we are cowards. And as long as the vast majority are cowards, the mold and the roaches will grow in the darkness. And when someone turns on the light and we see that the walls are all black and they're little skittery things, we go, oh, how could it be like this? Go look in the mirror and you'll find out.
Well, I've been waiting to end the show, but do you really want to end on that? Cockroaches scattering in the lake?
Every day, in every way, we're getting better and better. And remember, for the next couple of weeks, if it's Monday, it's off the menu.